Have you ever felt that intense, electric, almost inexplicable sensation of meeting someone for the first time and feeling as if you've known them forever? As if a magnetic field had suddenly activated between the two of you. That isn't madness, loneliness, or romantic illusion. It's the unconscious working in silence. Love at first sight is a real phenomenon, but it's not random. Behind that sudden impact, there's a secret code operating beyond logic, a field of energy, where your traumas, repressed desires, and archetypal patterns are alive, seeking mirrors in the outside world. According to Carl Jung, the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. That means when you feel that instant spark, it's because something ancient, perhaps from another era, or from an invisible record within your soul, is trying to become whole through the other. Love at first sight doesn't happen in the present. It's the reunion of two emotional memories vibrating on the same frequency, as if they've been searching for each other for a long time. And the most fascinating part, this powerful attraction, is rarely about physical appearance. What your eyes see is just the surface. What your soul recognizes goes far beyond that. This instant recognition can come from a person's energy, the tone of their voice, the way they look at you, or a gesture that evokes a memory you didn't even know you had. It's what psychology calls the imago, an unconscious image you've formed over your life about what love is, usually shaped by your earliest relationships with parents or caregivers. This image lives within you like an invisible radar, attracting people who resonate with your emotional learnings, whether those learnings were healthy or not. That's why love at first sight can be the beginning of a deep connection or a reunion with patterns you haven't yet healed. In both cases, the strength of the attraction doesn't lie. It's showing you something essential. It's pushing you toward your next lesson. When you look at someone and feel like you've found the love of your life, chances are what you've truly found is a deep reflection of something within yourself. Something you never had the words to describe, but instantly recognized. This is what we call projection, and it is one of the most mysterious forces in the human psyche. Jung said that we don't fall in love with the person themselves, but with what they represent to us. And that representation is unconscious. We see in the other our own lights and shadows, our unfulfilled longings, our childhood wounds, or even archetypal images we've been seeking all our lives. The hero, the muse, the savior, the rebel. When you feel like you know someone you've just met, what you're likely recognizing is a dormant part of yourself that this person, symbolically, has awakened. That's why intense loves aren't always healthy. They show us, with no filter, what is still out of balance within us. Projection is like a spell. It covers the other person in your own colors. You don't see them as they are. You see them as you need them to be. They become a symbol of your pain or your desire. And when that image starts to crumble, when the other begins to reveal their human imperfections, the enchantment breaks. That's why many intense loves end with the same force they began, not because they were fake, but because they were projected. The challenge of real love is to move beyond the layer of projection and see the other as they truly are, not as your psyche painted them. And that's only possible when you start to recognize what you were seeking in their reflection. Love at first sight, in that sense, is an invitation to self-awareness. It points inward. It says more about who you are than about who the other person really is. So the question is, are you ready to look into that mirror with courage? Now we see, turn the mirror around. Until now, we've talked about how we project parts of ourselves onto others, but there's an even more subtle and powerful phenomenon that also lives within love at first sight, the way someone else sees you. Without realizing it, you might become the living symbol of something missing in the soul of the one who desires you. Your presence awakens in them not just attraction, but a sense of wholeness, as if by finding you they could finally touch a part of themselves that had been asleep or repressed. This kind of connection is magnetic because it activates the unconscious of the other. You become a piece of an emotional puzzle they didn't even know they were trying to complete. And that's where the bond is formed with almost mystical force, not because of what you say or do, but because of what you awaken in the other's psyche, a memory, an archetype, a deep and unexplainable longing. Imagine someone who spent their whole life hiding their sensitivity because they were taught it was weakness. And then one day they meet you, someone who expresses vulnerability with ease, someone who feels deeply, someone who radiates exactly the frequency they had buried. The feeling is immediate. This person has something I'm missing. Not rationally, but viscerally. You become the mirror of what they need to remember. Jung called this process compensatory projection, when the unconscious chooses someone who represents what the soul is desperately trying to reintegrate. The other person doesn't fall in love exactly with you, but with what you symbolize. Maybe you are freedom to someone who lives in rigidity. Maybe you are presence to someone stuck in the future, or unconditional love to someone who only ever knew pressure and demands. You become, often without knowing it, the bridge between the other's pain and the awakening they need in order to heal it. And here's the most curious part. Often, the person who's drawn to you also feels the impact without knowing why. You walk into their life like a spark that reignites something that had gone dark. That's why so many intense relationships begin with phrases like, "It feels like I've known you forever," or "I felt an instant connection." But the danger here is the same as with projection. The other may idealize you, put you on a pedestal, or expect you to keep playing the savior role forever. And when you show that you're human, with flaws, contradictions, and boundaries, it can trigger frustration, abandonment, or rejection. That's why it's essential to understand. You are not responsible for the emptiness someone else feels. You can be a mirror, a spark, a trigger for healing, but never the ultimate solution. True love begins when both people recognize what they're projecting onto each other and still choose to stay conscious, whole, and free. When we talk about instant attraction, we're often referring to something that goes far beyond logic, the physical or the social. We're talking about the activation of ancient archetypes that live within our psyche, universal patterns Carl Jung called Anima and Animus. Within every man, there exists an unconscious image of the feminine. This is the anima. Within every woman, an unconscious image of the masculine, the animus. These archetypes are shaped not only by our experiences with parental figures, but also by the collective unconscious, by the symbolic energy of all humanity. And it is precisely this invisible image that we unconsciously seek in our partners. When we encounter someone who embodies even partially these inner figures, something ignites. It's not just attraction. It's as if we're rediscovering a lost part of our soul. Imagine that within you, there's an unresolved dance between your rational side and your intuitive side, between strength and softness, logic and mystery, action and contemplation. When you meet someone who expresses exactly what is missing or imbalanced inside you, that person activates the archetype. That's why love at first sight can feel so overwhelming. It's not rational, because it's not only happening at the conscious level, it's unfolding in a much deeper layer where these archetypes reside. A man might feel irresistibly drawn to a woman who embodies his unconscious image of the feminine, perhaps a woman who is sensitive, intuitive, artistic, even if, on the surface, he values the opposite. Likewise, a woman might fall for a man who carries the intensity, boldness, or firmness that her inner animus longs to integrate. But here comes the crucial revelation. These archetypes are not real people. They are projections of what we have yet to integrate within ourselves. This means that the deep desire we feel is often not for the actual person standing before us, but for what they symbolize inside us. And, of course, this realization can be liberating or devastating. Liberating because it shows us that love at first sight isn't madness, it's symbolic language. Devastating because over time we realize that the real person rarely lives up to the weight of the idealized archetype, and that's when the projection collapses, the moment when we must choose. Do we run, searching for another ideal image, or do we stay, willing to love the human behind the symbol? Deep down, the archetype we see in the other is an invitation to integrate that energy within ourselves. True love begins when the symbol awakens and the soul answers. The human mind has a unique gift. It doesn't just observe the world, it fills it with meaning. When we feel an immediate attraction to someone, this symbolic process happens at quantum speed and often unconsciously. What we call love, at first sight, may actually be the beginning of an archetypal projection. In other words, we're not falling in love with who that person truly is, but with what they represent in our inner world. We project onto them the anima or animus, that idealized image of the perfect partner, rooted in our shadows, unfulfilled desires and unresolved absences. At first, everything feels magical because we're facing a reflection of our own soul, but over time the image cracks, the fog begins to clear, and we realize the real person doesn't match the character we mentally created. That's when enchantment turns into confusion, frustration, and often pain. This is the trap of archetypal projection. It makes us fall in love with an idea, not with a person. It creates a mirror that reflects exactly what we're unconsciously searching for: affection, protection, safety, adventure, transcendence. And the greater the internal void, the more powerful the projected image becomes. The problem is, no, one can play a role that isn't theirs forever. Eventually, the cracks start to show. Behaviors that don't align with the idealized archetype, words that shatter the fantasy, human reactions that don't fit the myth we've constructed in our minds. And in that moment, we feel betrayed. Not because the other person deceived us, but because we projected onto them an impossible expectation. This often leads to heartbreak, the sense of being betrayed by fate, or a compulsive search for another soul who can bring back that magical feeling from the beginning. And so many people remain stuck in a cycle of passion and frustration, unaware that they are simply dancing with their own inner symbols. But recognizing this danger is also the first step toward liberation. When we become aware of the projection, we can begin to see the other person as they truly are, with their imperfections, their limits, and still their unique beauty. We begin to understand that true love is not born from idealization, but from acceptance, not from myth, but from presence, and more than that, we can use projection as a mirror for our own self-knowledge. Instead of searching outside for what we lack within, we can begin to integrate those aspects inside ourselves. The man who projects his anima can develop his sensitivity and intuition. The woman who projects her animus can strengthen her assertiveness and inner clarity. And when that happens, love is no longer an illusion. It becomes a real encounter between two whole souls who see each other not as myths, but as companions on the path of evolution. Behind every deep connection, there is a hidden purpose that goes far beyond fleeting emotion. In the field of depth psychology, especially through the lens of Carl Jung, love is not just a sweet feeling or a coincidence of fate. It is a force for inner transformation. Every meaningful relationship challenges us to grow. It confronts us with our shadows, reveals our emotional blockages, and invites us to integrate parts of ourselves that have been asleep. That's why true love is not always comfortable. It pulls us out of our safety zones and activates triggers that expose unhealed wounds. It reveals what we still need to develop in order to become whole. And for that very reason, love can be one of the most powerful tools for psychological evolution. When we look at the other with openness and courage, we begin to see what's really inside us. And when we become conscious of this, the relationship becomes a mirror for healing, not a stage for projection. Love, when lived with awareness, transforms. It requires us to develop empathy, to learn to listen not just with our ears but with our soul. It demands that we face frustration without running away, that we take emotional responsibility, that we let go of the wounded child waiting for someone else to come save us. Instead, it pushes us to mature, to clearly see our recurring patterns, to understand our unmet needs, and to transmute our deepest fears. Every conflict in a relationship is an opportunity for growth. Every difficulty an invitation to push past our inner limits. Every reconciliation after a crisis is a step closer to our wholeness. It's no surprise that many people experience spiritual awakenings or embark on profound journeys of self-discovery after an intense experience of love. Because love tears us open in order to rebuild us in a more authentic, grounded and complete way. And here lies the key. The love that evolves is not the one that idealizes, but the one that reveals. It's not the love that gives us everything we want, but the one that teaches us to become who we truly are. When we stop using love as an escape and start seeing it as a space for expansion, our relationships stop being emotional dramas and start becoming sacred grounds. The person we're connected to is no longer just an object of desire, but a hidden teacher, someone who even unknowingly is helping us remember who we are. And when both people are conscious of this process, a new kind of love is born. Mature, deep, real. A love that doesn't rely on the other's perfection, but on the courage of both to grow together. A love that doesn't imprison, but liberates. A love that doesn't just comfort, but transforms. When someone falls in love with you at first sight or feels an unexplainable connection within the first few seconds, it's easy to think it's just chemistry or coincidence. But from the perspective of archetypal psychology, what's really happening goes much deeper. You are not being seen merely as an individual, with your name, your story, your clothes, or your gestures. You are being perceived as a symbol, a portal, a living image of something that resonates directly with the other person's unconscious. In that moment, you represent something greater than yourself. It could be the figure of salvation, the reunion with the lost feminine, the presence of safety that was missing in childhood, or even the projection of an ideal life still out of reach. You become, unintentionally, the mirror of an ancestral longing that person carries within, and may not even fully understand. And this is where the relationship begins to build on a hidden, almost mythical level. The person begins to interact, not only with you, but with everything you symbolize for them. The light in their eyes may not be just for your face, but for the hope they project onto you. The touch may carry a thirst for healing, not just desire. The conversation might be reaching for more than words. It seeks belonging, redemption, even transcendence. And all of this is happening while, on the surface, you are just getting to know each other. You might be perceived as the energy of a nurturing mother, a protective father, an archetypal lover, or a guiding soul. And even if you're not aware of it, your presence is unconsciously activating those inner forces in the other person. That's why the enchantment can feel so overwhelming for such a brief encounter. The intensity of the connection feels disproportionate, because what's at play isn't just you. It's everything you represent. Understanding this is essential to avoid emotional pitfalls, because when someone falls in love with a symbol, sooner or later the image begins to crack. Reality steps in, your flaws appear, your humanity reveals itself, and that's when the other person may feel disappointed, not because you did something wrong, but because you don't match the symbol they projected. That disillusionment isn't negative. In truth, it's necessary. It's when the enchantment gives way to authenticity, and only then can real love begin. A love that no longer depends on symbolic idealization, but that sees beauty in your imperfection. Knowing that you are indeed a symbol in someone's life, but that it doesn't define who you are, is one of the most liberating realizations we can have, because it allows you to remain a light in the other's life, but now with your feet on the ground and your soul fully aware of the profound role you are playing. In the end, love at first sight is not merely a meeting between two bodies. It is a reunion between symbols, archetypes, and fragments of the soul that had been asleep. Every intense connection we experience carries within it the potential to show us who we are, what we're seeking, and what we still need to heal. When we realize that the other is not just a person, but a mirror that reveals us, a bridge between the conscious and the unconscious, love stops being coincidence and becomes a calling to awaken, to integrate, and to evolve. Because, deep down, what we feel in the presence of the other is not just about them, it's about ourselves. And maybe that's the most profound beauty of love. It pulls us outward, only to lead us back to what was forgotten within. When we see this, clearly we stop chasing love as salvation and begin to live it as a path of revelation.